Hello and welcome back to Petra Publications. I'm Davis, and today, before we get started, two things. One, I'm obviously struggling with a little bug here. And two, I don't know how much of my library you can see back there, but it looks like I'm missing a lot of books, and I am, and that is because, there were too many in here, and it was getting too heavy, and the floor was beginning to show signs of falling through to the lower floor, and so that was kind of a safety hazard to have so many in here. So fortunately, I didn't have to get rid of any books. I just had to kind of move them around the house a little bit and spread them out. And so it doesn't look as great behind me, but God was gracious enough to allow me to keep all of my books. I didn't have to get rid of any of them. But today, I have two book suggestions. These were books that I read over the last couple weeks, and really encouraged me and helped me, and I wanted to encourage you with them as well. And the first one is The Confessions of St. Augustine, and this is basically his spiritual autobiography. It's basically written as if it were to God, which is really quite cool. And he's talking about all his sexual immorality and all of those types of things. And of course, I don't hold to St. Augustine doctrinally completely, but this book is phenomenal, especially for men. Women can also read it, but for men especially, this is just a fantastic read. And there were a couple of quotes I wanted to read from this book as well. The first one was, "Time does not take time off." And that alone just blew my mind. Time does not take time off, nor does it turn without purpose through our senses. Again, nor does it turn without purpose through our senses. No, it works wondrous effect in our minds. And that just like blew my mind. And as I was reading this, it was just like, I wrote something in my journal like something along the lines of, it just cuts to a man's soul, like straight to the bottom of it. It's just such a fantastic book, and the fact that it's almost 2,000 years old is just, it's crazy. Like, mankind has not changed at all. But there was one other quote I wanted to read from this book as well, and that is, "There is no rest to be found where you seek it. Seek what you seek, but it lies not where you seek it. You seek a happy life in the land of death, but it is not there. How can you find a happy life where there is no life?" Obviously, he's talking about seeking after pleasure, seeking after the things of the world. You can go ahead and seek it, but life is not there. How are you going to find a happy life when there's not even a life there at all? And again, that just blew my mind. And I found this book at a Goodwill for like 25 cents or something. And so I read that in a couple days, and totally worth the money. I'll probably read it again, actually. But yeah, I do highly suggest this book to especially men, but women as well. Just a great read. And then secondly, what I have here is this book right here. This is A Christian Manifesto by Francis Schaeffer. And this book I actually bought at a college for $1. And I didn't realize what I had bought when I bought it. But I read this last week, and it just, guys, everyone, especially in our current time, in this government overreach time period, read this book, please. It will encourage you, it will help you, and it'll give you some answers to questions that you've had about this issue of people forcing you to do things with your body that you really don't want to do. This book encourages you to take a stand against that. And realize that this book was written in, I believe, 1988. So before really anything 1981, anything had ever happened. And yet he said, look, this is going to be an issue, and we need to know how to deal with it. And of course, I believe that the majority of Christians have failed there, but it's not too late for us to stand up against it. And so this whole book, he's referencing Samuel Rutherford's Lex Rex, or Lex Rex, sorry, and just talking about how tyranny is not anything that we should be bowing down to. Overreach of the government, forcingness, if that's a word, of the government, we should stand up against that. And as Christians, we have biblical grounds to do so. So I just wanted to read a couple different places from this book. And again, wherever you can find this book, however much it costs you, please buy it and read it and study it. But let me read this. We can be certain that what we so carelessly take for granted will be lost. And I read that, and I started thinking about that, and you can apply that to any area of your life. If we take it for granted, you can be certain that it will be lost. You will lose it. And I think in America especially, we as Christians took for granted the freedom of religious worship and the freedom of religion at all. We took it for granted, carelessly, and it was taken away from us. We lost it. And being the kind of people that we've been trained to be, we gave it up. We didn't even fight for it. We just said, yeah, here, take it. And that's bad. That's very bad. But you can apply that to any area of your life. If you take it for granted, it will be lost. But later in the book, he's talking about Samuel Rutherford's Lex Rex. I believe I said Lex earlier, but it's Lex Rex. And do a little bit of reading on that. Read the book, actually, if you can. I have, my brother has a copy of it. I think I'm going to borrow it and read it myself. But he says, Rutherford argued that Romans 13 indicates that all power is from God, and that government is ordained and instituted by God. The state, however, is to be administered according to the principles of God's law. Acts of the state, which contradicted God's law, were illegitimate and acts of tyranny. And he says, tyranny was defined as ruling without the sanction of God. Excuse me. He says, Rutherford held that a tyrannical government is always immoral. A tyrannical government is always immoral. And then skipping down over here, he says, Rutherford presents several arguments to establish the right and duty of resistance to unlawful government. So we remember that there were a lot of solid theologians and pastors that were telling us that we really shouldn't resist at all. We should just sort of follow Romans 13 and, not back down and not fight this at all. But Rutherford presents several points here. First, since tyranny is satanic, not to resist it is to resist God. To resist tyranny is to honor God. I'm just going to let that sit for a minute. Maybe I'll read it again. Since tyranny is satanic, not to resist it is to resist God. To resist tyranny is to honor God. Second, since the ruler is granted power conditionally, it follows that that the people have the power to withdraw their sanction if the proper conditions are not fulfilled. So here we see that there actually is a legitimate reason to stand up against tyrannical government. And let me clarify what I'm trying to say here. That is not to say that if you chose to do something, that you should regret doing so. I think if you chose to do it, then that, by all means, that's fine. But it's the issue of, those of us who don't want to take stuff, don't want to do certain things, that are being forced to do so. I think we have every biblical right to stand up against that. And according to Francis Schaeffer and Samuel Rutherford, even according to Romans 13, we have a right to do so. And not only do we have a right, but it honors God for us to do that. So then, skipping forward a little bit further, he says, please read most carefully what I'm going to say in the next sentence. If there is no final place for civil disobedience, then the government has been made autonomous, and as such, it has been put in the place of the living God. Very, very powerful stuff. Everyone needs to read this book. And then there's one more sentence here I wanted to read before I let you all go. And it says, it is time we consciously realize that when any office commands that what is contrary to God's law, it abrogates its authority. So anytime any office commands what is contrary to God's law, we need to stand up against it. They've lost their power. They've lost their authority. So this video is not quite as long as some of my other ones, but it didn't need to be. 2 books I highly recommend, especially Francis Schaeffer. Please buy those books if you can. Do so before they're banned. And that's pretty much all for this video. I hope that you are having a wonderful week thus far. I'll see you guys, Lord willing, very soon. God bless.